Hello, yeah, I've just heard that the body on the beach is actually a friend of mine. So obviously I might have information you guys need. We went out for a drink and he went off with somebody else and we thought he was with her. We thought he was back in Barking. And obviously something's gone really badly wrong and somehow he's ended up dead.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Just after it's got light, a metal detectorist is down on the beach. The tide is low, the sands are exposed, and the metal detectorist is walking along looking for little treasures that the sea might have brought in or uncovered, and he sees a strange kind of ragged bundle lying on the beach. And he walks up and he can see it's a body. He can see that whatever's happened to this person, it's not been a natural death.
Something very strange and terrible happened. He had 62 blows to his body. It was a mystery who this was. Nobody had been reported missing.
The body is literally in an unrecognisable state. There has been so much damage done to the head and face.
DCI John Claydon of Kent Police is deployed to the Isle of Sheppey to investigate.
The brutality of it was such that it was, from my own perspective, it was one of those things where it was as brutal as I've seen. Just brutally butchered. For what reason? What a way to go. I mean, some people, you don't know what misery they bring.
The victim was without trousers and shoes and underpants. There is no wallet, there is no passport, there's no driving licence, there's nothing at all to help the police. But there was one very interesting piece of evidence, and that is the body has a silver dragon design signet ring. Does anybody know? This is a very distinctive, very unusual ring. There won't be many rings like this, not in Kent, not in the surrounding area.
You need to circulate what we know, i.e. there's a dead body on the beach. Who is it? Why is it? We hope this ring will help us to identify the dead body. So we put out a message really for people to be aware. We posted online in the hope that it may give us some indication as to who the body is.
The Isle of Sheppey is a pretty unique place. You have a very transient population. There's like 52 holiday parks on the island. So this is very much a place for people to go and visit. It's very much a tourist economy. And the vast majority of that tourism is made up of predominantly East Londoners.
It's a fairly isolated little place, isn't it? And you've got a lot of local people, and 99% of the people that pop down to the Isle of Sheppey have a nice time and no one gets hurt.
The most popular destination for Sheppey is Laysdown. Laysdown as a resort has always aimed at families. During the winter, you expect to see tumbleweed blowing across the promenade. But during the 6 weeks of the summer school holidays, it gets a brand new life of its own. It's packed with holidaymakers, and it's a whole community. It's a community within a community. Rumours tend to travel at lightning speed, and none more so than at Laysdown on the holiday parks, where everybody knows everybody's business. And so if you get a rumour, within hours, everybody seems to know about it.
Staying on one of the island's holiday parks for the summer is 34-year-old Gary Pocock.
Gary Pocock lived in the Barking and Dagenham areas of East London. He'd worked most of his life as a caretaker. He didn't have a direct family. His parents had passed.
He lived with his parents for quite a long time. When they knew that they were not well and that they were likely to pass away, his parents asked Gary's friends to look out for him. And I think this kind of speaks to Gary's innocent nature. He's very trusting. Gary is a bit of a classic nerd. You know, he was into World of Warcraft, all that kind of fantasy gaming. It's all very mild-mannered again, and, you know, an innocent hobby, but that was really his passion. I think that he perhaps struggled maybe in certain social situations, and he just needed a bit of extra guidance, and his parents were concerned for him that when they were gone, he wouldn't have that anymore.
But he'd found the love of his life, a woman who had children, and these were his adopted family, really. The children weren't his by birth, but he treated them as though they were his own.
On the death of his parents, Gary Pocock inherits some money and turns to his friend Mark Terry for advice on how to invest it.
Mark Terry was also from East London, and they'd come in contact through family connections, and he'd done some work for his friend Mark Terry, just odd jobs, just a little bit of building work and gardening and so forth. But they were very different characters.
Mark Terry is a bit of a classic East End geezer, you know, a bit of a wide boy. He's relatively well known, even on the Isle of Sheppey. He's been holidaying there for years. He considers his second home on the Isle of Sheppey.
He was well respected. Certainly those that were close to him looked up to him. He had a group of teenage males predominantly that would help him out, that he would look after. He would put work their way. He was a bit of a father figure to some of the children down there, and clearly someone that they looked up to and someone that they would do quite a lot for.
Mark Terry owned a couple of chalets at this holiday park and said to him, "You should have one of these." And he had influence over Gary without a doubt, and Gary said, "Oh yeah, you know, that would be a great place, you know, it's by the sea, nice sandy beach at Warden Bay, kids can go build sand castles, and yeah, I think that's a really good idea." Mark Terry, I think, sold him the idea of buying this chalet, and fairly quickly, you know, the deal was done and he took it over.
The Terrys and the Pococks are all on holiday in the Isle of Sheppey, staying just a few chalets apart.
To all intents and purposes, they were there with the family, with the children, enjoying the summer holiday. Mark Terry's partner, Lisa Terry, was clearly friends with Gary's partner, and Gary as well.
And everything was going absolutely fine. Until there was this terrible, terrible murder. In the summer of 2013, Mark Terry and Mark Terry's family were staying at a caravan on the Isle of Sheppey, where they were joined by Gary Pocock and his family.
It's very much home from home. You rent a chalet or you own a chalet, and then you walk 100 yards to your neighbourhood pub down there. A lot of people know each other, so there's, you know, quite a lot of socialising goes on.
Mark Terry arranges a pub crawl with Gary. He also invites his son Matt, his friend Chris, and some mates from the island.
The night started with drinks in Merlin's Bar, which was a very busy nightclub in Lacedown, and a good place to start.
It seems that probably Mark Terry says, "I'm fed up with this place now, I'm bored with here. Let's go somewhere more interesting, a bit further along the seafront." So they all leave Merlin's, all had several pints of beer, no doubt. You know, they're all very jolly and merry, everything seems to be fine.
And then the party walked along the road and then down the promenade, past all the amusement arcades, which were still open, still making a noise. And they walked down to the seafront where there was the Talk of the Town pub. And that, again, very popular, very busy pub.
If you've been drinking in the Talk of the Town and seen this group come in, nothing remarkable about them. They're just a group of lads out for a few beers and a bit of fun. Everything seems to be fine.
But Gary does not return home.
Gary Pocock's partner is worried. All she knows is that Gary went on a night out with the boys and he never came back. So Mark Terry goes to see her and he says that on this night Gary had just left with another woman. He's cheated on her and he's disappeared, either gone off with this other woman or maybe he's too ashamed to come home.
Lisa Terry undertook a role in supporting her. She was providing support to her, as a friend would.
Gary's partner hears the news of a body being washed up on the beach and tells Lisa she's beginning to fear the worst.
Gary Pocock's partner, who's still at the chalet with her children, gets a rather odd text message on her phone, but she doesn't recognise the phone number. It's come off. It doesn't seem to have come off Gary's phone, so whose phone's it come off? It's just a one-liner which appears to be from Gary saying, "Can I come home tonight?"
Relieved that Gary has finally made contact and having spoken to the Terry family, she travels back home to Dagenham to see him, but he isn't there.
I mean, what could she be going through? What could she be thinking? It must have been really upsetting and frightening. It just sounds as if it was really out of character for him.
At home in Dagenham, she's already looking at social media and she's already looking at mainstream media because her partner hasn't come home, and by now she's really starting to worry. As soon as she sees that the police put out this picture of this ring, she can say without doubt that that is Gary's ring.
She immediately calls their friend back on the island, Mark Terry, who calls the police.
Hello, yeah, I've just heard that the body on the beach was actually a friend of mine. So obviously I might have information you guys need. So do you want to come around and see me, or do I come to you, or what do I do? You can imagine we're all hoping it wasn't my friend, and obviously it is my friend. So.
Right, okay. Thank you. Can I take your name first of all?
Yeah, of course, it's Mark Terry. Terry.
This person's really trying to help, was genuine, was doing their utmost to assist the investigation. It's a big moment because once you've got that identity, then take the investigation onwards.
How do you know it is your friend then?
Right, what it was, his girlfriend was in the chalet I sold there about a year ago. Right, what it is, she's seen his ring on the Sheppey website thing. I don't know. Listen,
oh, right, okay, yeah.
Right, she's seen his ring. We know it. Well, she knows it's definitely his ring, so it's definitely him.
He's talking very fast as if he's overwhelmed by the emotion and, he's shocked and confused. And he's also saying things very conclusively. This isn't someone holding out to that last bit of hope and then it sounds like he's tearing up.
What he done, we went out for a drink and he went off with somebody else and we thought he was with her. And obviously, something's gone really badly wrong and somehow he's ended up dead.
Right, okay, but you were actually with him the other night?
He's keen to help the police. He's volunteering the fact that he was with the victim, a few hours before he was found dead.
Was his girlfriend with him the other night as well?
No, she was at the chalet.
But he went off with another woman then?
Yes, he did. From the Talk of the Town. We thought he was back in Barking. So, which is really, his girlfriend got a text sometime yesterday saying he was back home. So he's back. So he told her he's back in Barking Dagenham. So we didn't think anything of this. We knew it wasn't him. Yeah, it's just such a shock. I can't believe it. We just can't believe it. God.
He spends 2 minutes, nearly 2 minutes, talking to the police, explaining how sad he is, how mystified he is, and he just sounds totally shocked that it could be his friend.
"36 hours after he was discovered, the washed-up body is formally identified as 34-year-old Gary Pocock.
It was obviously quite a relief when we managed to sort of make progress. It was brutal for Gary Pocock, who wasn't deserving of the treatment he got. It's stressful if you've been dealing with an investigation. Because of the uncertainty, it could have been anybody, couldn't it, that randomly attacked somebody.
The mile-long beach is cordoned off as a crime scene.
You've got so many questions unanswered. A deserted beach in the middle of what is a fairly well populated holiday area, but with nothing immediately looking over the scene, no witnesses, so very, very, very little to go on. Who was involved? Is there a wider risk to the public of there being somebody out there that is clearly someone that needs to be apprehended by the police as soon as possible? Or where's our starting point?
You keep your crime scene on as long as you absolutely need to, because you don't know what else you're going to find, and they will literally do a line search, a fingertip search of the area. We were able to see that there was some coins, there was also some keys, and there was also a tooth. It was believed that there was an attack site with some drag marks with the presence of blood, and this was taken down towards the direction of the beach. So we came to the conclusion subsequently that the body had been put out to sea and had actually come back in with the tide.
Also washed up are 2 baseball bats, one of which is snapped in half.
From my perspective, it was likely to have been a weapon that had been used, and such was the ferocity of the actual attack that it had broken the baseball bat.
The bats had been in the water. Never rule out the fact that you won't get anything back forensically. Never ever do that. You explore all possibilities.
The police are desperate for a lead as to who could have caused such brutality on the island.
There were rumours flying all over the place, and the whole island was on fingertips, waiting to know what had really happened.
The police would have known straight away that this was not going to be a case that would be necessarily solved easily or quickly. And of course they start immediately to canvass for eyewitnesses. They start looking for CCTV. People locally quickly get to know something serious has happened, and the buzz goes around very quickly. There's been a murder.
I worked all the way through the night and the next day because it was that type of inquiry that you just needed to keep the momentum going. And the village hall was key to us. I mean, we ended up staying there. It was somewhere that we could say, look, we need your help, and this is where we're going to be.
Detectives need to speak to the locals and tap into any rumours spreading through the island.
In many cases, you need the assistance from the local community because your community may have information that can be of assistance to the investigation.
We had in excess of 1,000 chalets that were in the immediate area of the beach where Gary Pocock's body was discovered. Any one of those chalets could have provided us with a key witness. But also any one of those chalets could have provided us with a suspect.
We go knocking on doors. That's the harsh truth of it. Trying to uncover who's in that caravan, who are they, where they come from, where they're going to, whether they're people that are exiting to go back to their home or whatever. So that you can imagine the amount of energy that's put into making sure that aspect of it, dull as it may sound, is actually carried through, because the person otherwise could have walked off and never been seen again.
but detectives direct most resources at the holiday park where Gary Pocock's friends are still staying.
We're always going to have in the back of our mind who has done this. Mark Terry, he was telling us that he was the last person or one of the last people to see Gary alive. He would be declared a witness to us and probably a significant witness to us. We need to understand why they're talking to us, how they can help the investigation, and we need to make sure that what we're being told is accurate.
A signet ring became quite important in as much as it was the key to identify the body on the beach is Gary Pocock. Then the next thing is, who are the associates? Where were they? Witnesses that may have seen it. So all of a sudden, from what was a small moment, we've now got a bigger picture that's being created.
As Kent Police CCTV team search all footage near to the crime scene for any sighting of Gary and his associates, the forensics lab comes back with the results from the 2 baseball bats.
We were able to identify DNA of Gary Pocock. It all fits in with blunt force trauma, and this was really quite a good indication that those weapons were the ones that were responsible for causing the murder. On one of the baseball bat handles there was some tape. Underneath that tape was a fingerprint impression. That fingerprint impression was identified to Jamie West.
Jamie West, a 19-year-old islander, becomes a suspect in Gary's murder.
It was shocking. I mean, all murders are shocking, but crime seems to be committed by people who have come to Sheppey from the mainland. And why it was so strange to realise, to hear in this murder, that a local islander might have taken part.
It is a big moment for the investigation because you're hitting all these barriers and then you get something that could be a bit of a breakthrough. So we need to establish all sorts of things in relation to associates and the lifestyle they lead.
Police intelligence look for any background connection between Jamie West, Gary Pocock and Mark Terry.
Mark Terry and Gary's friends on the island, they went to pay their respects by placing some flowers at the location where Gary's body had been found. There was a camera crew there.
The media interest locally and nationally ramps up quite a lot. So the police haven't solved this case, but the answer's out there. They ask Mark if he'll go up in front of the camera. You're his great mate. Listen, why don't you go and do it? And he says, all right, I will.
It hasn't sunk in properly yet. Something like this is just knocked everybody for 6. We none of us can actually understand the reason behind this.
Mark Terry made himself available more than he needed to be because he'd said what he'd said.
Matt Terry also decided that he was going to say something on camera as well.
I'd rather justice be served and whoever it is to be locked up for the rest of their life because nobody should have that done to them. Nobody in the world.
First impressions with Matt Terry was that he was fairly bright, had a future of some description, no doubt, capable of lots of things. He's fit looking.
Young lad, student, I think reasonably popular. He had a decent looking car, which probably again would create an impression about the type of person he was. Presented as somebody who had an awful lot of respect for his dad, saw his dad as a bit of a fixer. He'd always listen to his dad and go by what his dad would suggest to do.
Detectives review Mark's account from the night of Gary's murder.
What was really important to us is trying to prove or disprove the accounts we were given. And clearly the account given by Mark Terry that Gary had met up with another female, and the only way to obtain that evidence is by throwing resources at it.
Police officers speak to pub owners and local residents. Did anyone see the woman Gary met with on the night of his murder?
Police get as much CCTV footage as they can from the area. Places like the pubs along the seafront. And sure enough, from Merlin's bar, they recover interesting footage.
This is the group leaving Merlin's to start to make their way down towards the waterfront. So you have Mark Terry leaves first with Gary Pocock behind him, and then at this point 2 young men walking behind him. We need to identify who those males are.
Digital forensic investigators collate all the available footage from the seafront to follow each of the men's individual movements.
What we see here is 2 young men leave the pub at one moment during the evening and they go to a convenience store. What they're doing in the convenience store isn't of importance, but footage like this provides us with key evidence in terms of identification, because what we can see from the footage is clearer images of the 2's faces. We can see their clothing, you can look at their build, you can look at how they walk, and that helps us to identify them on further bits of footage where perhaps the facial images aren't as good, the quality of the CCTV is not as good.
Detectives identify the 2 men. First is 20-year-old Matt Terry, followed by a local 15-year-old schoolboy, Richie Zabrowski. In further footage, detectives also identify Christopher Bones, a 19-year-old friend of Matt Terry from London.
I mean, the evidential value of the CCTV, it helps bring it all together, you know, them going out socially, drinking, the movements of them afterwards as well.
There is yet more interesting CCTV from along the seafront. What we have is Matthew Terry, Mark Terry's son, leaves the pub ahead of the others. He goes out to the car park, he unlocks his very distinctive red Ford Focus, drives it along the seafront towards the home of a man called Jamie West.
Jamie West is the local teenager who is evidenced to be the owner of the baseball bats found at the crime scene. Detectives speculate why Matt Terry would leave the pub crawl to travel towards his home.
It's all recorded clear as day on CCTV. There's a lot of cameras along that seafront, and there's this group of men apparently quite happily walking along. And then for some reason they deviate from their course along the paved way of the esplanade and disappear onto the beach.
It's just 4 people walking along, seemingly going back home after a good night out.
Less than 40 minutes later, there is more footage that stands out to the detectives.
We see 3 males walking past. They are later identified to be Mark Terry, Chris Bones and Richie Zabrowski.
Guess who's not with them? What's happened to Gary Pocock? No explanation. You know, come on, what's happened to him?
Had Gary Pocock returned to the talk of the town, we'd have seen that on the footage. Had there been a female that was following the group behind, we'd have seen that as well, and we didn't. We know this is the last time that we've seen Gary Pocock alive. In our eyes, proves the lies, untangles this web that has been told from us from the very first phone call that Mark Terry makes to the police.
Hello, yeah, I've just heard that the body on the beach was actually a friend of mine. So obviously I might have information you guys need. We went out for a drink and he went off with somebody else and we thought he was with her.
We were really able to pull apart the accounts we were given. If we can identify one lie, then are there others?
With the 5 suspects now linked to Gary Pocock through CCTV and DNA evidence, the police make their arrests, and one by one they are interviewed in custody.
The police are looking for the weakest link. They separate them and start to try and have a conversation with them, ask them questions and see if they would talk at all. all of them steadfastly denied having any knowledge of or taking part in the murder. It's time, I guess, as far as the police are concerned, to turn up the heat on the suspects.
The police still need more evidence to link the 5 suspects to Gary Pocock's murder. They start to investigate the text sent to Gary's partner the day after the murder, which was supposed to look like it had come from Gary.
First and foremost, we need to know what number it came from, because it was clear it hadn't come from Gary Pocock's phone. So we were able to identify the number and the person who owned that telephone. And as a result of that, an inquiry was made to visit that individual.
The owner of the phone, who works in East London, tells police officers his account.
That individual went walking to a bus stop. He was stopped by a young man who he didn't know. He said that he'd fallen out with his girlfriend and needed to make contact with her. Could he borrow his phone? And that's exactly what he did. A young man sent a text message inferring it was in fact Gary, but it wasn't.
Police urgently need to identify the young man at the bus stop who borrowed this phone while pretending to be Gary Pocock.
That in itself opens up an awful lot of work for us, but we know London buses have CCTV fitted with them.
Detectives identify over 50 buses that could have passed the bus stop within the hour that the text message was sent.
We, seized a colossal amount of footage. What did help us was that we knew the time the text was sent, so we were able to then focus.
After hours of analysing all available footage, they see the owner of the phone talking to a young man at the bus stop. Afterwards, the young man leaves on foot.
The person was walking towards the vehicle.
The young man gets into the car, but they can't make out the registration plate.
We continue going through the footage, and eventually we identify a bus that pulls up behind that red vehicle at some red traffic lights. And just before the traffic lights go green again and the red vehicle pulls off, we get a crystal clear image of the car registration.
Detectives trace the registration plate to Matt Terry.
We've got conclusive proof that this is Matt Terry. That was a major breakthrough in the investigation, and one of those moments that we would refer to as a golden nugget moment, because you've got him.
The police now have proof that it was in fact Matt Terry who sent the text to make it appear that Gary Pocock was still alive.
I think there's a really important power dynamic at play here, where Mark Terry is essentially trying to cover his tracks. He gets his son to travel back home and basically to feed her some lies. He's trying to cover all of his key alibi points, so she's not going to raise questions about whether that's Gary's body on the beach.
This gives detectives even more compelling evidence to put to the suspects.
They interview them over and over again with no success, until it's the fourth interview where one admits that he was present at the scene.
And eventually, look, I was there, I was involved, I do know what went on, but I am heavily influenced by Mark Terry.
Police finally have what they need. They can now charge all 5 of the men. Mark Terry, his son Matt Terry, his friend Chris Bones, and the 2 islanders, Richie Zabrowski and Jamie West.
All 5 are charged with the murder of Gary Pocock. As far as the law is concerned, it's a joint enterprise. All 5 men pleaded not guilty, and they're all sent for trial the following year at Maidstone Crown Court. In a trial like this, the victims' families have to go through the ordeal of listening to all the events, no matter how gory, no matter how upsetting. Every last grisly detail has to be laid out in full, in detail, for the benefit of the jury.
The defendants begin on each other. They each deny any direct involvement in the murder, except for one, who gave his account from the witness box. At Maidstone Crown Court, one defendant tells the jury his account of Gary Pocock's murder.
I have a summary of the interview. He admitted that he was present when Gary Pocock was murdered, and he said that it was pre-planned.
Mark Terry decides to hold a meeting for the rest of the gang.
Mark Terry said to them, you know, we need to deal with this bloke. He's a paedophile. He's in their parlance, they would call him a nonce. We need to sort him out. You know, he needs to pay for these horrible crimes.
An accusation that is so heinous that it immediately dehumanises Gary Pocock, the worst of the worst. What Mark Terry is really doing is it's like he's whipping up a mob. It's like he's getting a vigilante group together there and then whilst they're all intoxicated, and I think he's doing that very intentionally.
Motivated by the horrific rumour, the young men helped Mark to lure Gary Pocock to the beach.
They'd have gone on the beach, going down these steps, and I'm surmising, in fact, that this is where it's all happened. Matt Terry is waiting just over there, waiting to come out from their hiding and then attack. They had no time to make any sort of escape.
Matt ran over, smacked him all over the head. I've seen him go down.
He manages to cry out and probably shouting, you know, stop, don't do any more of that. And he gets to his feet and he tries to run away. But he's very quickly pursued and caught by Matthew Terry, who's wielding a baseball bat.
Then I saw the hit connected straight on the back of his head. Gary fell to the floor screaming. He couldn't run because Mark, Chris and Matt were punching, kicking him, hitting him with the bat. There was an explosion of blood.
Then, of course, is an absolute frenzy of violence.
There's a lot of symbolism, I think, within this murder as well, because this isn't just murdering someone as quick and easily as possible. You're seeing this mob essentially gang up on one victim, and also specifically the fact that he's had his trousers removed and then he's stomped on, that directly links to what they've been told, which is that Gary Pocock is a paedophile.
I saw the body go up and down. I thought he was dead now as I couldn't see his stomach moving. Mark said they had to get rid of him, drop him in the sea. Alibi was discussed when they were walking back from the attack. They all had a shower. Mark washed the clothes with bleach. Chris is pouring everyone drinks.
This was an horrific murder, and one of the most violent, I think, that I've ever seen and heard. It is, without doubt, one of the worst crimes that Sheppy has seen. It must have been hell for him to go through.
Mark Terry told the group that Gary Pocock had assaulted a teenage girl.
You don't need to prove motive for murder, but it was never reported to us. Any allegation of that nature is a serious allegation to be made. What isn't right is for people to take justice in their own hands. What is right for that to be reported to the police. Gary Pocock deserved the opportunity to speak up for himself. That opportunity was taken away from him.
Mark Terry decided not to give evidence at trial.
I think he very knowingly is manipulating the people around him. He knows that this group of young men are very easily amped up. He wants to stoke the flames against Gary Pocock, and he knows that the ultimate worst thing that a man could be accused of doing is being a paedophile. And he knows that by dropping that in with these intoxicated young people, that it is going to escalate.
The whole thing seems to have been driven by Mark Terry. Don't forget, there was a huge age difference between him and the rest of the group. He was in his 40s. The rest of them were all, 20 years or so younger than he was. And I think that they looked up to him as an influential character, perhaps even a little bit of a father figure. Nobody wanted to argue with him.
He's created a witch hunt. If you create this monster, then you don't feel bad about going after them, to switch off those human emotions and attack.
Another piece of CCTV also makes its mark on the jury.
As they're just about to go off the camera, Chris Bones does pretty much a fist pump into the air. Now only he can tell us what that meant, but certainly knowing the rest of the information that's already been put to them, I think the jury would have looked at that and put quite a big significance to that in terms of his demeanour and what they'd achieved.
They hardly have the demeanour of people who've just taken the life of an innocent human being. I've covered hundreds of murders in my time, but having said all that, I'm still, quite taken aback by the casual nonchalance that this group strike afterwards. They don't seem to be affected by what they've done at all. If anything, they seem to be probably a bit high on the adrenaline of it.
The case concludes and the jury retire. Following the 10-week trial, Mark Terry, Matt Terry, Christopher Bones and Richie Zabrowski are found guilty of murder. Jamie West is found guilty of manslaughter.
The judge, in summing up, said that Mark Terry was the ringleader and the mastermind behind it and organised everything.
We thought he was back in Barking. Well, obviously, something's gone really badly wrong and somehow he's ended up dead.
Mark Terry's attempt to put the heat off him by doing the 999 call to the police and the interview with the television news team ended up giving the police an awful lot more evidence.
None of us can actually understand the reason behind this.
I think Mark Terry believed that he could outsmart us, the police. He underestimated us, he underestimated the team.
Jamie West, sentenced to 7 years in a youth detention centre. Richie Zabrowski, sentenced to life with a minimum term of 13 years. Christopher Bones, sentenced to life with a minimum term of 18 years. Matt Terry, sentenced to life with a minimum term of 19 years. Mark Terry, sentenced to life with a minimum term of 26 years.
What's very clear here is, regardless of what led up to this, Mark Terry was very much the instigator, and none of the people around him stopped to ask questions, and following that blindly can be so dangerous. That's clearly what happened, and ultimately Gary paid the price and he lost his life.
When you see just their stupidity, but as you get to a certain age, you become more, I suppose, thoughtful about why did they do that. When you see kids, which is what the majority of those were, and they're still now troubled by the consequences of some very bad decision making, they'll certainly regret those choices they made, and they've got another 20 plus years to ponder it. It was complete madness, and the person best placed to having stopped it in the first instance would have been Mark Terry. But it's one of those things that you just can't fathom why people do what they do.
Something that could easily be forgotten is those that Gary Pocock left behind. Gary Pocock's partner was someone who featured very heavily in our investigation. But after the trial, after the convictions, she's still there. She's still got that loss and that hole in her life.